It did not start with people calmly deciding to spend a day watching death. By the time the hard parts arrived, they were already seated, already looking around, already part of something that had been moving since first light. You came in with everybody else. That mattered. There were entrances, assigned sections, clear ranks. People were not just wandering into a killing ground. They were filing into a huge public event, checking where they belonged, spotting who was above them, who was below them, who had come early, who was still pushing in late. A lot of the first energy went into that. Finding space, making room on the bench, calling to someone a few rows over, looking down at the arena floor while nothing decisive had happened yet. The shape of the place did some of the work for them. Everybody faced one center. Everybody knew where to look when something started. So the day got its grip before the bloodiest part ever appeared. People settled the way they settle at any big show. They ate, talked, pointed things out, complained if someone blocked the view, laughed at late arrivals trying to squeeze past knees and sandals. Once you have gone through all that trouble and finally sat down, you do not leave just because the first act is light. And the first act usually was lighter, or at least busier. Morning gave them motion. Animals, handlers, staged hunts, performers, things crossing the arena floor from one side to another. You had reason to keep watching because something might bolt, stumble, turn, or surprise the men supposed to control it. That kind of opening helped with the crowd itself. Tens of thousands do not all arrive with perfect attention. Some are still talking. Some are still finding seats. Some are craning for a better angle. Morning spectacle could survive that. You did not need complete silence or deep concentration. You just needed enough movement in the sand that heads kept turning back down. If one display dragged, the next one was already the answer. That was part of it. People learned the rhythm fast. A weak animal act did not mean the whole day would be weak. A clumsy handler got jeers, but the audience knew something else would come out soon enough. So boredom had a harder time taking hold. You can picture how people watched it. Not in one solemn mood. More like constant adjusting. Lean forward for a charge. Sit back when a bit runs long. Talk over the slower moments. Cut off your sentence when the crowd suddenly roars at something happening on the far side. It kept the arena from feeling fixed. There's always another entrance, another release, another scramble. That variety also prevented people from sitting too long with what they had just seen. An animal goes down, crews come in, something gets dragged away, sand gets worked over, another setup appears. You do not get much pause. The floor changes, the crowd murmurs, and attention gets pulled into the next arrangement before the last one has settled in anybody's mind. The practical side mattered more than people sometimes think. Bodies had to be removed. Injured animals had to be dealt with. Props had to come in and out. Men had to rake and reset the surface. If that took too long, the crowd sagged. So the whole machine of the day had to keep the empty stretches short. And whenever attention started to slump, the reset itself became part of the show. People watched workers move quickly. They guessed what was coming from whatever was carried out next. A gate opening on one side could wake up a whole section. Half the audience spent the day trying to read the setup before the announcers confirmed anything. By late morning, people were no longer deciding whether this was for them. They were in the rhythm of it. Watch, react, talk, wait, reset, watch again. That is a different state from walking in off the street. You have been there for hours. You know the pace. You know that a dull stretch usually means something sharper is being prepared. Then midday changed the tone. Not all at once, with some grand speech. More in the way the arena started presenting people instead of just displays. The crowd was no longer mainly watching men manage danger. They were being given condemned bodies to judge. That shift could have stalled the whole place if it had looked too much like bare procedure. So it was framed. Crimes might be announced. The condemned could be costumed, positioned, made to fit a role the audience could recognize right away. Instead of an interruption, punishment arrived as the next item on the program. And people behaved differently when they were told what kind of person they were looking at. A man in the arena was not just a man anymore. He was a thief, a rebel, a criminal. Somebody marked out as deserving what was coming. That label did a lot of work in a crowded place. It gave strangers something easy to agree on. You can hear the social reaction changing there. Less festival chatter, more pointed response. Some people mocked. Some shouted judgments. Some craned to see whether the condemned looked defiant or already broken. Once the audience had a role for him, they started reading his face and posture through that role. And not every execution landed the same way. That is another part of why people kept watching. They were not responding to blood in one flat manner. If someone stumbled, begged, or panicked too early, parts of the crowd lost interest or turned cruel. If someone stood straight, hesitated at the right moment, or showed composure, attention sharpened. So the arena kept turning death into comparison. Who looked cowardly? Who looked stubborn? Who seemed to understand what was happening? People in the seats did not just consume an outcome. They judged the performance on the way to it. That judgment filled the dead time too. While the floor was being cleared again, people talked over what they had just seen. Not in abstract terms. More in the ordinary way crowds do. That one went badly. That one lasted longer than expected. He should have run sooner. He had more nerve than the last man. Then the next setup pulled them forward before the talk could settle. Midday also hardened people by repetition. One condemned person goes out, then another, and the audience gets quicker at reading the type. Faster to jeer, faster to approve, faster to decide whether this one is worth full attention. The response becomes efficient. The crowd no longer needs much help understanding what kind of moment it is. By then they had spent hours in a place where reaction was shared out loud. If one section laughed, another picked it up. If a wave of noise rolled from the better seats, lower sections followed. Nobody had to invent a private response from scratch. The building told them where to look, and the crowd told them how to sound. That is a big reason they stayed. It was easier to remain in the current than to step out of it. Leaving meant climbing out past rows of people, missing whatever came next, and giving up your place after already investing half a day. Most did what crowds usually do when the program keeps moving. They stayed seated and let the tone change around them. Then the afternoon gave them the part many had really been waiting for. Gladiators did not enter as just more bodies. They came in with names, pairings, equipment, reputations. Suddenly, the audience had something richer to work with than simple guilt and punishment. Now people compared styles. They looked at armor, reach, confidence, the way a man carried himself before anything started. You could have an opinion before the first clash. That kept the crowd busy in a different way. Instead of only waiting for an ending, they could argue about who looked better prepared to reach it. The earlier parts of the day had already trained the audience into this. They were used to quick reading, used to judging courage, hesitation, awkwardness, control. Gladiators gave them a cleaner, more admired version of the same habit. Watch the body. Decide what sort of man this is. React when he confirms it or ruins it. And because these fighters had skill, the attention got finer. A crowd that might have treated executions as something to shout over could go quieter in the middle of a good exchange. People started watching feet, balance, timing, whether one man was tiring, whether another had made a mistake he would pay for 2 moves later. That changed the whole feeling of violence without removing the violence. Death was still in the arena, but now suspense did more of the work. People were not only waiting for someone to die, they were waiting to see if the better fighter proved it, if the braver one could recover, if a man already hurt could still make the other earn it. And again, not every bout worked the same way. A quick mismatch could disappoint. A cautious fight could irritate people who wanted commitment. A sharp reversal could wake the whole place up. So the crowd remained selective all the way through. They did not clap merely because steel was out. They wanted a contest worth talking about on the walk home. By late afternoon, they had spent the day moving through different uses of the same arena floor. In the morning, it was novelty and movement. At midday, it was judgment and punishment. Later, it was prestige and skill. Each phase solved the problem left by the previous one. Too much spectacle and people start wanting stakes. Too much punishment and they want somebody worth admiring. Too much one-note brutality and attention flattens. So the day kept changing the terms before the crowd could go dead on IT. The seating helped all the way through. Everyone could see the hierarchy around them as much as the action below. Important people were visible. Sponsors or rulers were visible. Approval could be noticed. Disapproval could be noticed. A man in the upper seats was not reacting alone any more than a man near the front was. The whole place behaved like one body with many ranks. And once thousands of people have spent hours roaring, jeering, debating pairings, judging the condemned, and waiting for the next gate to open, death does not arrive as a single shocking fact each time. It arrives inside a routine they now know how to follow. The floor is cleared. Sand is fixed. Noise rises. People settle. Another figure enters. By sunset, a lot of them had not sat through one long horror. They had passed through a sequence built to keep changing shape before attention failed. They had been given something to do at each stage. Find your seat. Watch the animals. Complain when a bit drags. Judge the condemned. Pick a fighter, shout with your section. Wait for the next entrance. And because the day kept feeding the next reaction so quickly, there was never much need for anyone to stop the whole thing in their head and refuse it. Not while the crews were already in the sand again. Not while people nearby were still arguing the last bout. Not while everyone kept glancing at the gates to see who was coming out next still.